welcome everybody to KC Happy Hour episode number 86. Of course, my name is Xander Clements, your guys' host. We've got Taylor Burris and Aaron Hackmeister who are behind the scenes a little bit tonight. You'll see a little bit of them as we get later into the show for our standard Q&A section for the final segment. But I am super excited for tonight's show. First of all, we've got our resident American, European, however you want to phrase it, analyst, driver coach and former driver, and of course the owner of Offset Sport, Chris Wehrheim, coming to us live from the airport. Chris, appreciate the time off tennis to come and hang out with us tonight.
Of course.
And joining us for the very first time, Mr. Joe Turney, Mr. America, it seems, with how many wins you've gotten here stateside, although the record's been a pretty solid start to the year, if I must say, man. It feels like we're seeing more winners posts from you than anything else.
Thank you for the warm welcome. Bit late here, but it's fine. I enjoy doing these sort of things, so let's do it.
So let's get into it first. Before we touch on some of the other things, of course, after last week, we had a lot of our viewers kind of chime in and ask us some questions about the OKN package. We got the first live streamed a U.S. version of it with one of the I think this was still only the fourth ever race in the world for the package. I don't know if a lot of other ones have run it yet. I think the Italian Championship's next up here, either this week or next week, that's going to run it. But had the Challenge of the Americas for 3 rounds, the biggest turnout with 17 for this one for us. I want to get into that for you as a guy that's right now kind of top of the heap, top of the pyramid in the open formula single speed stuff over in Europe. But before we go there, I think it's always cool because we have a lot of new or relatively new kind of climbing the ladder carters that follow us. To walk us through that USPKS Houston weekend, because you've been fast at all the races you've come over here for, both of the Homestead runs. Orlando, you were quick as well and drove that race, I think, pretty smart, even at points when you weren't the quickest guy. But when we got to that main event in Houston and even through the heats, you were one of, if not the fastest driver on track. So, I think the first thing to describe, to know that you're at a certain high level, like your weekend kind of layout, right? USPKS, you weren't at the test weekend, correct? The week before, you were just there coming in the week of? Yeah. So, you get 5 sessions on Thursday. Granted, that 5th session was pretty late in the day, so not everybody went out for it because it was so late it wasn't going to give you a whole lot of accurate information. But Thursday and Friday, like, how many sessions was it learning the track? How many sessions was it chassis setup and engine tuning, of putting on the race engine to try it out and make sure that it was solid? And at what point was it like, I'm going out for a session and I don't really need to? Like, what was kind of, if you could walk through the whole, thinking back to those 5 sessions Thursday, 5 sessions Friday kind of, or 4 sessions Friday kind of format?
We were quite lucky, I think, early on in the week, because there was forecast rain on one of the first 2 days and during the testing, and then that didn't end up happening. It never rained, so we got all dry running in the testing. Although at USPKS you start mid Thursday, so we actually turned up on the Monday expecting to be on track either second half of Wednesday or early Thursday, and it ended up being second half of Thursday. So already we were a bit short of sessions. Went out on Thursday and the track was pretty slow, but obviously we hadn't been there. So I was just there thinking, right, well, this track has no grip, thinking about stuff we could have done. But track was just getting quicker and quicker through Thursday. Tried to get behind some like guys who were fast on that day, some guys who had been at the test, to try and see if I was doing anything wrong, see if I could learn some lines. Like, I'd watched some onboards around there and stuff before, just doing what I can really to see where the track goes and whatever. Walked the track the day before as well. And the first day just sort of taking it easy, as in not going crazy if you're not quite fast enough or whatever, because with a night's sleep on after the first day, go back to the hotel, think about it, and then you come back better every day when it's a track that you don't know so well.
And I mean, in Thursday and Friday, like when you got into qualifying wasn't where you wanted to be, but I think right before qualifying, one of those last two sessions, you were the fastest or one of the top two. So, I mean, with two full days of practice, 5 sessions Thursday, 4 sessions Friday. Granted, again, the fifth session was kind of late. Was that enough for you guys? Would you have wanted more? Did you feel like, from the test weekend, you didn't even need to be there for it?
Well, I think even all the way through the weekend, like even say the final on Sunday, I was still learning things as I was going around about the track. Like you can get to a decent level after a few sessions. I mean, I think by mid Friday before the quali, we were in a good place. The last session before the quali, we were fastest. Tried to go alone in quali, didn't really work. But we knew the speed was still there, and as soon as we went back out for the heats, the speed was still there. But yeah, I mean, you can get to a decent level after a few sessions, but then to find that final bit to then try and win the race, I mean, you just find a bit more every session, a tiny bit, and then by the final on Sunday, I think everything sort of came together. I mean, we were fast at the other races, Homestead, Orlando, but then that race was sort of like, I mean, you get one of those races a year, like when sort of everything's perfect on the Sunday, new tires and just got everything right.
Right, because it is almost a bit of a gamble, right, on that Sunday, when you're going to new rubber on the track, develop, from a day and a half, you haven't put new rubber on, so you don't exactly know. But is that like a fair assessment in your eyes, right? Like, I mean, it was just, could you put a pinpoint on the edge, or just kind of almost like a gamble of what you thought was right? It all kind of came together perfect.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like the Sunday's tough because you do your practice at like 9 in the morning, and then you don't run again until 12. So no, sorry, not 12. I think the final was at 2. So it's like
about
you have 5
2:30.
hours. Yeah, you have 5 hours not driving. I mean, I had lunch at like 12 and then started to feel tired, had like a nap in the tent, and then woke up about an hour before the race, and I was like, needed to get someone to like wake me up. So I was just messing around with Tate in the tent and my mechanic just to get me sort of ready for the race, because when you're off for like 5 hours, it's hard to sort of like to get back into that racing mindset.
And I have a question for Joe.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to hear kind of Joe's perspective of, the way the weekend kind of rolls through in the European races, whether it's WSK or the CIK races, is quite a bit different than SCUSA and USPKS, where we, a long session for us is 8 to 10 minutes, where, you don't really get anything more than like a 5 or 6 lap run in reality, right? Once you're kind of warmed up. In Europe, depending on the series and the year, you have that 15 or 20-minute session. You can hot pit. You can decide to go on a bit of a long run and kind of figure out the tire pressures and the tire tag and everything. So do you prefer one or the other? Is it kind of cool having like these shorter sessions where you have to find it a little bit quicker? Or do you like having, that, yes, it's less sessions during the day, but you have more time on track during the session to kind of figure things out and work on setup, hot pit, and work from there?
I'd say I prefer like the more frequent but shorter ones, because say a long like 15-minute session, okay, so we'll go down with over here we'll go with 2 carts with an engine on each, and then we can do like 7 minutes on one, 7 on the other. But say for like the X30 races or whatever it is, Rotax, OKN, you got 1 cart and 1 engine. So, say, we could get 12-minute sessions, but only really about 6 minutes of that session matter, because then the tires are going to get hot, and then you're going to slow down for the last 5 minutes anyway. So I'd rather just have more frequent ones, say 1 every hour if you can, and then you can test more throughout the day. because here, like, I mean, as well, saying the X30 races over here, the Rotax races over here, they give you a 10-minute session. Everyone just sits and waits for 5 minutes anyway.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, just because, I mean, they can go out first and then, like, you could be P1 within 3 minutes, but then the people who have all waited in the pits all go out together, get a tow, and then they just go straight past you anyway.
So, like, I guess kind of piggybacking off Chris's point, right? Like, there's not a lot to learn on the long run, by doing the long sessions. Like, it sounds like even for the longer hot pit sessions you guys have over at the FIA events, you're not even like going out for 15 minutes or going with the same cart, come in, minor adjustment, and still run on the same used rubber. You're basically treating it as like 2 7-minute sessions, yeah, just with 2 different carts, so a slight setup change.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Like two different carts with 2 sort of directions, and then we might have on a Friday 2 or 3 sessions before quali, so then you can turn that into 4 or 6, and then you find your quali setup, and we'll just spend Thursday and Friday here. The quali's so important. It's kind of tough to pass in the races. You just find your quali setup, and then when it gets to the race, worry about that.
Yeah.
Well,
you've got to quali as high as you can, and then after that, you won't even have to change too much. I mean, it's not like a car where you're on high fuel or low fuel or whatever. Your quali setup's going to be similar to your race setup.
So, we know, like, your background here for us, where, I mean, and I think a lot of the guys that found us on YouTube can recognize you from the Super One streams and all the other, English races you race coming up, and then got hooked up, got the Tony Kart ride, and then over here with KR. So let's talk racing over here, right? First of all, was that at all like part of something you wanted to do, or was just you were kind of open to it, of coming to race in America versus, racing at home versus racing the FIA stuff? Was that something you pushed for, or was that something when you went to the KR, team and you got the agreement done to go be a KR factory guy this year, they're like, hey, we want you to go here? Or did that even come after you guys had agreed to go and work together for the season?
No, so it was always something that I wanted to do. Like, I remember being younger, like 14, 15, watching the Florida Winter Tour back when it was Rotax. I remember even watching like the 2014, I think it was, Grand Finals when it was in NOLA. And since then I did want to race in the US, but then I was focused on European stuff. Then I got the ride with Tony Kart, raced with them for 4 years, and at that point they stopped racing in America. I know they used to do the Super Nats, but they stopped doing that a few years ago. So I never raced over here. And then when I was talking with KR, it was something that they mentioned they wanted to do with me as well. It wasn't a reason why I went to race for them, but like a culmination of reasons, and that was one of them.
And expectations, reality. What's kind of like, what'd you expect it to be like here? With where we're at now, running X30 against all of our guys, and then what was it? Was there anything you didn't expect that it turned out to be real over here? I know you and I talked about it a little bit, even at the first Homestead weekend, of the guys you thought you'd be running with, and the guys that kind of surprised you, that you were like, man, this guy's at another level.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I expected it to be tough, but then coming in at the first race in Homestead, I think I had a good Saturday in the first Homestead. I qualied near the front, had a decent pre-final, and then won the final. And then Sunday was like a reality check. It was like I think I poled quali, but then pre-final like P2 or maybe P1, and then the final I just got beat up. So I was like, okay, right. And then I went home Sunday, and I was on the flight back thinking like, that's kind of like a tough way to end. Sort of wish that the tough day was Saturday and then the good one Sunday. But I finished on a tough one Sunday, having just been beaten up, and I was like, okay, like these guys don't mess around. No, it's tough.
I feel like and Joe, you can speak on this, but I feel like, the X30 field that we have right now with, Morgado, Ramos, a couple other drivers, and you have, Eli Goldstein coming over for some races. The level is really, really high, and I would argue it's maybe one of the highest in the world, because you look at Eli, and he's a very experienced driver. He's been around quite a bit all over the world in different categories. Okay, X30, Rotax, and he's having a hard time breaking into the top 7, 8 on a regular basis. So Joe, do you feel kind of the same, that the level here is maybe a little bit higher than maybe some people would recognize?
Yeah, for sure. In the X30, for sure. I mean, I can't really comment on other classes because I haven't raced them.
Yeah.
Raced them over in the US, but in England now the X30 is fairly small. I mean, the only competitor I'd say on the level with the US at the moment is the European series, just the X30 Euro series, the one that goes around Europe. But obviously that's taken drivers from 15, 20 countries around Europe. So for the US to have that, when a lot of the races as well were on the East Coast as well, you're taking drivers from a smaller pool of drivers, but in the end, the level's still really high.
Yeah, and like the FIA stuff, how many guys are in OK Senior on a that I would say are similar to you, right? Because you have the kids with some of them may be on discounted deals or sponsored rides, but at 14, 15, that they've got budget behind them. They've probably been spending 200, 300,000 euros a year, and they're on the F4 up the F ladder as far as they can go.
Yeah.
What does that OK class look like over there, and how does that kind of compare with the number of fast guys over here? I mean, it's tougher to gauge because the parity's not there on engines, but from your eyes, what's that like?
Yeah, well, I think I spoke to you about this. I'm not sure if it was on an interview or just in person, but I mean, there we've got there's a ton of fast guys there. Level's still really high. I think we had a record 90 drivers at the first round of the European this year for OK. But then drivers like me who are sort of my age, 80, 90% of those drivers are all either 1 or 2 years out of junior. But then drivers in my situation who are sort of 18 plus, trying to work out of this sort of thing, there's only sort of like 5 or 6 of us left. And
Gotcha.
and they've I mean, go back 6 or 7 years ago, OK was full of like factory drivers who were working for teams and who were racing in KZ and OK, in the shift around the OK. But now it's like a lot of those older drivers were sort of getting their ass beat by the kids. And in the end, it was just easier for them to race KZ and then coach or whatever. So a lot of them just went to do that, and it's left probably 5 or 6 of us who are still trying to beat these young boys.
Well, you're doing pretty good at it.
Yeah, I would say so.
No, we're trying.
Is that mainly it? Because I mean, over here, whenever we hit the off season, one of the biggest topics of debate, and Chris can attest to this, is the minimum weights that we have for all of our classes over here, because every single one is higher than the FIA stuff and is typically higher than a lot of even the European nationals for any of the individual countries by usually at least 5 to 10 pounds, couple of kilos. Yeah. I mean, you can look at just the population. Americans are typically a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, whatnot. Was that at all a factor, you think, from a guy that's been in that scene for a handful of years now, of some of those guys that were like, hey, I can't even make weight at OK anymore, and I just got to run KZ and KZ2? Or was it more,
for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, like the weight for us, it went up 5 kilos this year, so I think it's about 12 pounds. I'll check now.
That's big, yeah.
I mean,
I remember
limit was 320. Our weight limit was 320.
Wow.
And that's just so low. I mean, like, it was only about 12 pounds more than the juniors. And I'd say the juniors was about right, but then the seniors, like, you're getting guys who are 16, 17, and they're not like particularly big guys, and they just can't even run because they're just too heavy.
Yeah.
And that was driving people out. Like, people would just go and race KZ if they get too big, or X30, or they'd either stop, or they, if their plan was to go and race F4, they would, but if not, they just stop.
I remember speaking to Travis Sanudo quite a bit, kind of at the end of him racing the OK stuff and the diet he had to be on. He was just like, and he's not, Lorenzo's not a big guy at all. And, he's just like, this is unattainable to continue like this. And to the point that kind of Joe was making, you're racing, he got to an age where he's like, I'm racing against 14, 15-year-olds now. I'm getting up there, not close to my age, but obviously, he's in his 20s, kind of like Orion. And he's like, man, this is hard racing against 14, 15-year-old kids. Like, this doesn't feel right anymore, So it is interesting with the weight, and kind of you get to a certain age and you're like, this isn't relatable to me to race against these young kids.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree. Like, I was going to say as well, like, the sort of comparison. When I win a race over here now, sometimes it can feel a bit like, and it shouldn't feel like this, but it's almost like I won because I'm racing kids, or I should win because I'm racing kids and this is my job. These are just kids just out of junior. I should win these races.
Right.
When actually these kids are unbelievably quick and as fast as any karter in the world, and it's as hard as anywhere in the world. Whereas when I race over with you guys, if I win a race, I feel like I've earned to win the race because we've worked hard. The equipment's been good. We've raced people who are all of the sort of same situation as us, and we've come out on top. So it's like, okay, that felt good. But then if I win a race here, it's sort of like, okay, good job, you won a race. You're 6 years older than most of them.
And I gotta ask, like, I almost feel like it's unfair to ask you questions about, not doing what you're doing right now and running OK Senior over there. But I think it's a fair thing to ask. I mean, right now you were top of the world going into, the rest of the regular season, the World Championships later this year. You've had more wins, I feel like, than almost any karter in the world at the level that you've won at. But, like, is that something that you've started to ask yourself? Like, after 2023, do I go back to OK? Or let's say things go perfect. You don't have any mechanical failures. Your speed is as good. You make the right decisions. You win the OK Senior World Championship. And it's like, I've won it. This is supposed to be an adult class, but realistically it's not. I've got to now adapt and learn how to drive a KZ if I want to continue to, get the drives that you have right now and be able to work in it in race. Like, do you think about that at all right now? Again, I hate asking you this because you're on a banner start to your season.
Yeah.
You've had the best start to your year ever, but it shouldn't be that we're asking an athlete that's at the pinnacle of our sport in what's supposed to be a pinnacle class. Hey, first year at the top, get the hell out so you can stay alive. But do you ask yourself that at all?
Yeah, to a point. I mean, I love OK class. Like, I really enjoy racing it because it is, I think, the top class before you go into shifter stuff. And that's just a whole nother thing. Like, for me, like, pure karting, OK is as hard and as pure as it gets. So I really like that side of it. And as well, it's important for the manufacturers. I mean, I'm not sure what the statistics would be, but it is probably 90% of Kart Republic's business, or maybe 80 or 90% of its business, is the direct drive kart, is the tag direct drive sort of senior chassis. So it's important that we push that as well. And a big stage for that is OK. So if I'll probably be racing it next year, probably yes. Would I prefer things change to get more drivers in it like me? Yeah, 100%.
And let's switch gears, I guess, a little bit, right? So as a guy, we'll get into kind of what I think a lot of viewers want to know from someone on the inside, right? We're just now getting a taste of the OKN. I know you and I have talked about it a lot. You've talked with some of my guys about it a lot, of what it's like running an open formula class. And I think the biggest thing that Americans and all of us over here need to understand is kind of what to expect, for example, with the OKN format. Because while it is restricted, and while it is based off of the OK platform with a little bit less things, a little more restriction on who's making the parts, I think is the biggest distinction. You can't go into it expecting it to be the exact same as what we've been used to with the X30, with Rotax, or even with Rock GP. So you've been on the other side. You've been driving for Tony Kart for years when Vortex was not the dominant OK manufacturer. And even talking off camera, when one of the first times I met you and was talking with you and Kart Republic team manager Ricky, like, yeah, this guy should not have been anywhere near any of our Kart Republic drivers, because we were on not only a good chassis, but on the engine to run an OK Senior, and you'd crack the top 5 and split them up every time. So from a driver's side, for the last few years of being in that open formula class, again, it seems like OKN will be similar. What's that like?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, like you go to races, there's 4 different manufacturers, right? So you've got IAME, Vortex, TM, and Modena. And you go to races and, okay, one might be more powerful than the other or whatever, but also some will work well in certain tracks and not in others. So you go into races sort of not knowing where you're going to be, whether you could be at the top one weekend really competitive and the next one struggling to be in the top 10. It's just the nature of how the engines can be, because they do vary track to track on competitiveness. So that's something to bear in mind for the people doing it. And yeah, it can be tough sometimes. Like you can go 3-4 races back to back and stuff not quite be good enough. And then you'll go to another race and it will all be fine. So it's a tough class. I mean, some people as well, it's a bit sink or swim with how they get on with the engine. It being direct drive as well is something that not a lot of people would have raced. So it is different, and it's something to bear in mind. But no, it's definitely going to be an enjoyable class. I mean, I've tested it, but that was a sort of pre-production thing last year. So I'm not really sure on the final product. I'd like to have a go in it and see how it is.
And just from a direct drive class, and even from running the OK stuff with the higher rev limiter that's a little bit faster from the X30, the first easy thing is the speed, right? We're not going to be as draft dependent. We're going to have a touch more of a little bit of air wash behind a guy in the high speed corners because we're being able to corner faster. And you're going to have more kind of just individual ability. The field's going to spread out more. It's not going to stick together. That's the first thing. But from the stylistic point of not having a clutch and being direct drive, you have the engine braking and stuff like that. Can you break down what that's like as a driver? What's different, from driving a clutch kart?
Yeah, I mean, apart from the braking, there's not too much different with how the engine reacts. But I know the sort of tendency for the OKN and the OK is it does have a lot less bottom than your X30 and Rotax that you're used to. When you put your foot in on them, they're ready to go every time. And with the OK, you do have a bit of delay in the bottom. You have to set the carburetor quite rich in the bottom, so that you don't have a lot on when you first go on the power, but then in the middle you'll get a big burst of power, and that's sort of what you're aiming for. So you have to drive around it as such. Like with the X30, you can sort of smash your foot in and go. With the OK, you have to think about it a bit more, and the engine might be faster around the lap in one way, but then it might be hard to drive, and you sort of have to drive around that.
And so do you prefer either engine platform? Let's say in an imaginary world, the parity is the same. If like everybody ran the same direct drive, as a purist of karting, do you prefer that stuff? I mean, what do you, rank it compared to the clutch drive karts, again, with more bottom than the standard OK and OKN stuff that we're seeing right now? It's heavy mid.
I mean, clutch or no clutch, it doesn't really fuss me too much. But like, I'm a racer, so at the end of the day, as much power as I can get is best. So I like the OK for that. It would be nice for the X30 to have a bit more power as well. So I mean, if they put a clutch on the OK tomorrow, it wouldn't really fuss me at all, to be honest. It's just whichever engine has the most power, I'll choose.
Fair enough. Well, we got a commercial break here for the first segment. Chris Wehrheim's actually moved from the Delta Lounge. He's on his way to his gate right now in the superstar status that he is. Joe's here staying up late. So for all you guys, stay tuned in. We got this commercial break. We're going to continue this conversation after the break, so stick with us. KC Happy Hour will roll on with a little more chats with some of our resident analysts. Kart Store USA is a kart parts supplier that racers and retailers can count on when they need reliable advice and service. We focus on servicing all racers with honesty and pride while maintaining customer satisfaction. We carry a full stock of Kart Republic and Tony Kart chassis, as well as IAMI and Vortex Rock engines. We've also got a host of other parts available and in stock, such as products from Rev Performance Materials, Jecco Racing Seats, and more. We have a 100% satisfaction guarantee, and on top of that, if your order exceeds $200, shipping is on us. Check out all we have to offer today by visiting us online at kartstore-usa.com. Don't settle for a national engine builder. Take care of yourself with an international one. SRP Engines is a global industry leader in engine services, specializing in engine formulas such as KZ, OK, OKJ, and Mini 60. SRP Engines is the engine of choice for Magic Kart USA and helped power North America's #1 ranked pro shifter driver AJ Myers to the 2021 SuperKarts USA Pro Tour National Championship. SRP Engines can also service any spec engine class of your choice, including IAMI and ROC divisions. However, if you're looking for the absolute choice when it comes to KZ shifter engines, there is nobody better. For more information, contact Amr Sanada at srp-engines.com. KC Happy Hour is proudly presented by the Rock Sonoma Karting Championship, presented by Cameron Race Promotions, the most competitive Northern California karting series. Featuring a 2-day format with practice on Saturday and racing on Sunday, multiple track configurations, and a massive prize structure including tickets to Rock Vegas, race car test opportunities, and race rewards. Rock Sonoma is the training ground of multiple national karting champions each year and race car champions as well. Featuring a full Rock Cup USA class structure with each race weekend streamed live via YouTube, it's a series you cannot miss. For more info, check us out online at zanzarukarting.com. All right, guys, welcome back here to KC Happy Hour, episode number 86. Got myself, got Joe Turney, got Chris Wehrheim somewhere in the Atlanta airport, somewhere around, working his way on over to a flight. So, Joe, we've talked a lot about the OKN stuff a little bit. I know that that's one thing that will be a big part that we'll talk a little more on the discussion. But from your side, you know, I imagine, you know, the Winter Tour, like you said, was streamed, was an event, that a series you wanted to come over. The Super Nats is on everybody's calendar, I feel like, worldwide. That's up there with the FIA World Champs in terms of the stature, being able to go to Vegas, all that. Chris, are you walking on the plane? Hold on. This guy, man.
I was joking. I think the last time I was on the podcast is when I got pulled over in Canada for trying to stream and drive.
Well, I'm glad you're flying at least this week. I don't think there's any kind of arrest policy for live streaming as you board a plane, but this fucking guy. Anyway, so what's the? I think first, before we talk about attraction to racing in the U.S., you know, it definitely seems like it's more tense, more serious, a little bit less almost fun. At the highest level over in Europe, and even at some of the different European races. Maybe I'm wrong on that respect, but from the FIA stuff you've run to some of the other Euro series like Champions of the Future, to the Super 1 Paddock and the British Kart Championships Paddock. I'm not sure which of the different X30 English championships you ran, and then the races over here, right? is the vibe the same from here to, let's say, England? How much different is it from each of the national champions to the international? Can you describe a little bit of that first for the crowd to kind of set the stage?
Well, I'd say the national paddocks, I'd say, are all pretty similar. I mean, the American paddock, the British, the Italian, whatever, they're all pretty similar. But like the point that you made, the European, as in like the FIA paddock, is really serious. I mean, I think the thing is to remember there is a lot of the mechanics and a lot of the people working for the teams there are full-time employees of the company, as in like, so some of our mechanics will work full-time with Kart Republic. They'll live near the factory, and that's a big part of their life. So they'll work there full-time in the week, go to the race, and that's sort of what they're building up to. So it's a really important thing, and it is important for the manufacturers as well. So it is a serious sort of thing. A lot of the manufacturers there might not even be making money to do these races. Might be losing money, even some of them, to do the races. So it's important that they do well, and I think that's why it is so serious at the races.
All right. We've got a couple viewer questions we'll get to. Let's stick on what we've got right now, though. So in the U.S., from an outside driver looking in, is what's piqued your interest, right? We'll put it both the races that we've had on the map, whether it's Supernats, the Winter Tour, anything else. Is there anything that sticks out to you that's special about what we've got over here that's attractive for someone that doesn't live here in America to want to come and race over here? I mean, I know obviously in your position, there's really not a lot of control you have of where you get to race. Like you said, it's culmination of factor, but at the end of the day, it's hard enough to make a living racing a go-kart. So you're going to take whatever you can get at the best opportunity you can get. It's not like you can go and demand, I'm going to race here or I'm only going to race here. But from what you've experienced here stateside and what you've seen that's drawing you in, can you elaborate on the stuff like that? Because I think that's something that's interesting both for our people here and the series promoters as well, of like what does attract international talent and outside of Americans to come and race our races.
Well, I think first of all, like the job that you guys do, the kart chaser guys, it's important. I mean, like the streaming gets a lot of views from people over here as well. And you guys do a good job of promoting the races, but the drivers as well. So like for drivers who want to get a bigger name in karting, I think there's no better place to be than to be racing in America as well. I mean, let's compare it to the FIA, sort of like social push or whatever. You might not see as much on the social media as the FIA page as a driver as you would with you guys. Like, I do think that it's important for the drivers to be pushed as well, which you guys do a really good job of. So that's a big factor for people who want to get out there and try and progress their career a bit further, get sponsorship or whatever. If you can do well in America, you're going to get a lot of publicity, not from just you guys, but from EKN as well, or whoever might be at that race. America are very good for like a big, let's say, show, and for like getting people out there or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, for us, that was for sure one of the cornerstones, I thought, that needed to be to get, long down the line of this pipe dream of having karting be its own more standalone spectator type sport. That could still be a launching pad to the car stuff for sure. And, the streaming stuff, I think it's funny because we even have American kids over here that want to come and race Super One specifically because there's all those old race replays. I mean, they were tape delay broadcasts even, it wasn't like they were live, but all the stuff from, no American kid, I think if you go to like again, this is the YouTube generation, me and you and below, right? Of 24 and 21, that live on iPads, live on iPhones. That's something you and I know of, knowing the kids know now. But they know probably the FIA Worlds. They probably know Supernats from all the push over there. The winter tour, even the stream stopped for a little bit, so maybe they don't know that. And then they know Kart Masters, right? The major, British karting championship one-off race of the year at PFI. That's something that's 100% attested to those guys having those race replays on YouTube that slowly popped off year after year after year. Hold on, I had one more here. Oh, actually, let me get to the Q&A really quickly. So we had a couple here. Aaron, can you go ahead and throw a couple of those on screen? We had a few questions that have come in here specifically for Joe. So dealing with the OK motor, again, this is probably OKN, but from this is from Dustin Domey, is a Louisiana guy. He says, dealing with the OK motor, what's its weak points?
Well, performance-wise, it doesn't really have any. Weak points is, I guess, reliability, as in you'll blow reeds quite often, any more than 4 hours on the piston, and you're probably going to be on the limit of like it can just blow randomly. So yeah, I'd say reliability, probably cost. I don't know the cost of the parts, but I guess they're probably more than the X30 and Rotax parts or X30 Rock, whatever parts are. So yeah, performance-wise, the engine's fine, really good, but longevity isn't as good as it is with an X30 or Rotax. If you keep them maintained well, then you'll definitely get a lot longer out of them. But I know you're pushing 40 horsepower out of a 125, so it's still going to be, it's not as reliable as it could be. With the juniors though, they are really good. I mean, an OK junior will run for 25 hours, probably 20 hours on a piston, but the seniors are definitely more temperamental.
The next one comes from Racing Junkie, which is, this is asking you, as a guy that raced OTK for a long time at home in the X30 stuff. Joe, how does the Kart Republic compare to the OTK and Tony Karts as a driver? Obviously, we do know you get to work with Dino a good bit. We know you get to work with the team manager, Ricky. You're their lead guy in the single speed stuff. But chassis to chassis, what's the difference in feel?
They are different. I mean, a Tony kart is probably a kart that's limited more by the rear. You've always got front grip. The Kart Republic's more the other way. You've always got rear grip, and you're probably chasing front grip. So two sort of different ways of trying to achieve the same result. And then we all know how close they are on performance. At the end, it's just going to be driver preference. If I was to choose now, I'd take the Kart Republic. We're having a really good run. I'm feeling comfortable with the chassis. So I'd take the Kart Republic for the moment. But I mean, it depends. That at the end, they are very close on performance.
Let's see. We did get a question that came in off our Instagram. This one was actually asking how old you are. You're 21, right? And recently turned 21. Do you turn 22 this year or next year?
I'm 22 this year, in a month and a half.
Oh, I'm way off.
Yeah,
all right.
I'm getting old.
Yeah, you and me both. Too old for this
I should
stuff,
be.
Man.
I'll be 22 before I'm back over. So
Chris's flight is supposed, as according to what he told me, departs here in about 7 minutes. So he's probably got a safety briefing going.
I'm still
here. I know
here.
you're here. I want to get you before you get airborne to grill our guy here, Joe. So what else do you got that we should ask him from your perspective?
I kind of would like to maybe go back to the beginning of the conversation. And I think one thing as a driver coach that I've noticed, and something that I preach to the drivers I work with, but something I've noticed a lot recently with you, Morgado, Ryan, a few other drivers that are a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, the way you approach learning a track is quite a bit different. You see a lot of drivers, they go out, they just try to go as fast as they can every session, right? There's not that much thought. But I'll watch you, I'll watch Mateus, and I'll see you guys drive a little bit slower, kind of slow down mid-session. I'll see you, kind of almost purposely look with your eyes, even though I can't see them, of like, hey, maybe this curb, let me try this curb a little slower. Let me see if I can roll on this curb a little bit differently. I think maybe if whatever you're willing to kind of share your approach of learning a track, I think that's one of the things that I think sets you apart. You know, sometimes people have you on the watch or Mateus on the watch early in the weekend and you seem maybe a little bit off, but then boom, you know, you're there when it counts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like in one way, if you're driving the track at 100% and your brain's going as fast as it can, you're going to be missing stuff as well. But I've always thought, well, recently in the last few years, I've sort of learned as a senior, if I can be fast when I'm only pushing 80%, if I can find everything working when I'm pushing 80%, when I need to push in a race and I need to find that extra 20%, then I've got it. Whereas a lot of drivers will try and be as fast as they can and get everything to go as fast as it can every session. And if you can then match them when you're not, say, trying as hard, or if you know you've got a bit of time in the pocket, then when you need to find it, bam, you have an advantage. So it's not that we're not trying to show our cards early in the weekend. It's just that we're sort of trying to make sure that everything's right, so that then when we go to push, then we have an advantage.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the 80, like the saving the 20%, right? Like I would imagine that's probably not getting the most out of the brakes, like shortening your braking zone, maybe not picking up the throttle as early in the corner where you feel like you're almost fully hooked up versus when you know you can get onto the power and get out of the corner. Is that kind of what you mean when you're saying you're going at 80%, like you're coasting maybe a touch, you know, you're going easier on the brakes in? Like what's 80% to 100% in your eyes?
Yeah, I guess so. Like sort of a bit in the braking zones, a bit on the throttle. You're still trying to do a good time, and as well, like track position's a thing. You might just go out in those first few sessions alone, go by yourself, see where you want to be on the track, see what's good, see what's not good. When you're ready to follow someone a bit faster, then you can. But I mean, to go out first session and chase down people and try and cut through the pack in the first session isn't something that I'm really that worried about. I mean, if I know that I can do a time not pushing quite 100% and completely alone, then I know that, say, when I go into the quali or whatever, I'm going to be good. I've got 2/10 still in my pocket. It should be fine.
And when in your career did you kind of start thinking like that? Because that comes from a place of confidence, you know, that comes from where you've kind of gone easy on a weekend, or maybe even, you know, started kind of dialing back through practice. And by the end of the weekend, I imagine the first time that you've really felt like that strategy works was when you were slow in a couple sessions that didn't matter and fast when it did at the end of the practice rounds, at the end of testing, in qualifying and through the races. Like at what point was it when you were still racing strictly for the British team? Was it when you were a couple of years into running for Tony Car Factory? You know, I mean, that sounds like a very solid mentality, but I feel like it comes from a place of like, I've done this before. I know what I'm capable of a little bit as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been fortunate enough that I've raced with good teams and been with really good material. So I know that sort of once I do my job, that I will always be fast come the important time. So in that sense, it's like I sort of don't need to panic through the testing. Just make sure that everything's right, everything's working. And it's hard to do. I mean, like sometimes you feel like you're not getting the most out of sessions, that you're not really that fast. But as long as you know that everything around you is working and that you're in a good place driving the track correctly, then everything will be fine. But then on the other hand, when not everything's working and you don't need to panic, but you need to sort of find that extra bit, that's when you can start to push 100%, go around with the pack, and then you get a gauge for whether you're good or not, where you might be better, where you might be losing, and from that you can improve.
And do you have someone that kind of taught that mentality onto you? Is that where you've kind of just developed on your own, you know, of this kind of go by myself a little bit at the beginning, go a little bit easy, and if I'm a little bit off, but I'm taking it easy and I'm without a toe, I'm good, you know, or like, is there someone you can attribute learning that from, or was that more self-developed?
Probably not anyone sort of in particular, but I've had mechanics and stuff who they've sort of been like, no, I want you to go out alone. And they'll, in the OK, you can't just press your button and go. So in the X30, if I was like, nah, screw the mechanic, I'll press my button and go when I want. But in the OK, you've got to go when your mechanic pushes you. So they'll just be like, no, you're going alone. Everyone will go and they'll just push you 20 seconds after. So then you're like, I have to do my session alone now. So yeah, I mean, but I think racing in the OK as well, like I was saying before, I think that sort of taught me to do that as well, because in the OK it is very important. Okay, you've got to drive well, but you also have to be on top of the equipment. Like the carburetor's got to be perfect, the engine, the sprocket, the tire pressure, the chassis, everything's got to be right to go fast. So practice sessions are used for you to learn the track, but as well to make sure all the equipment's working. So I think racing in the OK has sort of taught me to do that. So now, of course, I'll use sessions to make sure that I'm doing my job right, but as well making sure that everything's correct.
Chris, I know you're on the limit.
I got one last one.
I was going to give it to you.
Okay, so I think as all the drivers that brought over to Europe with me over the last 15 years, I think the biggest shock to the parents and to the kids, you know, obviously the big haulers and the tents and kind of the seriousness that Joe talked about. But I think maybe the funniest thing is the parents when you go out for quali or some of the more important sessions, and you know, a track like Sarno, say, where the tire dag's a little bit higher and you can really do the lap on one lap, and you're sitting there on the grid, you know, and it used to be an 8-minute session and they're sitting on there waiting until about 3 minutes for that clock, just the perfect timing for you to do one lap. And that kind of, you know, bravado of the top drivers going, I only need one lap. Yeah, you can follow me if you want, but I'm going to do my lap. I'm going to get my spacing. It'd be interesting to see Joe's kind of feeling on if he likes that kind of, you know, vibe of like that seriousness of you only have one lap, and you know, obviously sometimes it can bite you, or if he likes that, you know, how we do. Everyone just goes out at 8-minute session, you find your track space and you try to get your lap in.
Yeah, honestly, I hate that waiting thing, because you're just sat on the grid, like kind of shitting yourself, ready for like, you need to go out and do one lap, find the position, and it all comes down to that. I hate that. I mean, there's no worse feeling than just sat on that grid waiting for that rubbish. Like I'd rather it's just as soon as it goes green, everyone goes out, and then if you're fast, you're fast. If you're not, you're not. Like that's the juniors. I don't know how they do it. It's like they'll wait until there's a minute on the clock, so they'll go out, do their literal out lap, and then they cross the line with 20 seconds left. The next time they cross, it's checkered. So that's that. And I don't know how they do it, but and when it is like that, I mean, all it takes is for one person in front of you to go off, and then your lap's screwed, and that could be your weekend done. Like if you don't get that lap, that could be your weekend. So yeah, I'm more of a driver that likes to go out, get my space, calm down, and then try and do a lap.
All right. I hear you. Chris, is that it for you tonight here? Are you boarded and out of the way then?
I think I'm out. Doors closed. Off to Tucson for the Rotax West Championship race. So another weekend, another race. Joe knows the life. Xander, you know the life. So yeah, back at it.
Too much, man. Take it easy. Be safe.
Have a safe flight.
See you guys.
All right. Yeah. So down to just you here, Joe. We had, so building off that, what do you think of like we have I think it's USPKS still is a 2 or 3 lap session, gridded by the last practice, and then SCUSA is that normal 7-8 minutes. Everyone typically goes out for the whole way. Do you have a preference either way on those kinds of formats? Where,
well, one thing I was actually gonna, just thinking about it now you've brought it up, is the happy hour thing. So we don't have happy hour over here. You just sort of like put your cart down on the grid for quali and then go when you want. Whereas obviously we have the happy hour in America, and it's like, so say you're first in happy hour, you line up first on the grid for the quali. Like, tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like if you're pole in happy hour, you should then start last on the grid for the quali. Like, because then you can see everyone when they go, and you can decide where you want to go, and then you have like an advantage. You have people to follow or whatever. Whereas in USPKS, it was like you start first in the pole happy hour. You start first on the grid. You got to go first, and it's like, right, well, now I'm sort of like at a disadvantage because I'm first, pulling everyone else around. Okay, yeah, it's up to me. Then I can lift and go behind anyone if I want, but like, I feel like it should be the other way around.
Well, I can tell you a little bit of the backstory on it in two fronts. Even in mini and micro now, at some of the series, you grid for every single practice session in the order that you register for the event, strictly because guys would push the slow kids if they were a mechanic and they were coached as anyone is in the sport when you get paid to be a coach or a mechanic, that you're demanded results. So it's like, all right, I'm going to take my kid. I'm going to put him first on the grid, even if it's 3 seconds off. And he's going to get passed the whole time, but he might follow someone fast. And then the fast guys get mad because they get held up. So they go to the front of the grid. And no one, up until maybe a couple of guys in the last year in mini and micro, have realized, they're all going out first. We can just go to the back. It would be the funniest thing at Supernats and the last few U.S. Nationals of the year, Pro Tour, USPKS, whatever. Let's say X30 Senior was 2 sessions ahead of mini and micro. We would be going to the grid. The mini and micro would be on the grid as well, or at the pre-grid, ready to go. 3 sessions ahead to get the spot. And then these guys were fighting each other. Like the mechanics are running like full sprints with the carts as soon as they put them on the ground, crashing into each other on the grid, pushing off. It's crazy. And so the same thing with the happy hour. The happy hour, I mean, I think the gridding, I think that's fair. I think the gridding's a little necessary, right? Like I went P1 in a happy hour in KA at PKS years ago, and it was like at Newcastle, Indiana, which you haven't been there yet, but you will be soon.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's a 1.1 mile racetrack with super long straightaways. So I let off instantly on the outlap, and I'm not in the same way as someone else right out of the pit starting getting the heat in the tires, because that was my only chance to try and drop behind someone and not just tow the line around. And I wasn't the fastest either. I mean, it was 100cc at a track that's a mile long. I got that lap off of a tow. I was a 5th place guy that weekend. So it's better to go 5th or 3rd or even 2nd in a happy hour than it is to go quickest. So I get why we do it, because we typically only ever have 2 groups in qualifying, maybe 3. I mean, USPKS, I think, overkills it to try and do a 2-lap session that's spread out. So for the classes that are above the cap at, let's say, 60, they do 15 kart qualies that are gapped out and so on. So they do 4, but you could just make it where you get into the group and you line up wherever. The idea of happy hour is to split the groups and the haves and the have-nots versus a lot of European races where is it the 101% rule? I think it is for like, if it
something
rains,
like that. But like, I mean, unless it rains or something, no one ever really gets to that. But like, I mean, in the X30 and Rotax, you're always going to have that, and in Mini as well, KA, whatever, you're always going to have the problem of the slipstream so much that like people are going to be rolling over or whatever. But something they do in the UK now, so for the quali they do, they take your 3 best laps and they do an average of those laps as your quali time, and it actually works pretty well. I mean, it's not as pure as quali like in Formula One where it's like 1 lap. That's your quali. In one way, that's cool, but in the other way, like, it's kind of risky. There's a lot of rolling out, people trying to find that one perfect lap. Here now in England, they do, so it's like a 6-minute session, an average of 3 laps. People just go, they just try and do 3 laps as fast as they can. If you find yourself in a position, great. If you don't, I mean, you still got 3 laps to sort of, no one's getting 3 perfect laps out there. So sort of people end up where they should be a bit more. I feel like that's a pretty good system that more people should look at.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, I remember thinking out like when I was dreaming when we started Kart Chaser, the whole beginning of where we're going is to help move our sport to have a fan-based race, right? So if you could have full disclosure over the format, I was thinking something similar, right? Where instead of an average, we would just do 2 qualies. Like you'd go in and you'd go to basically a parc fermé and sit for 10 minutes, and then you would go to a second session. And so your times from each session, your average either position or your combined total time would grid you. And that way you just, like you said, you net out where everybody roughly should be. And those fluke laps kind of go out the window. And it's the same mindset with how we have the sessions now, right? Like SCUSA still has the 7-8 minutes. USPKS used to be that way. Everybody would go out and you would just play musical chairs of who would lead the train to get a tow and get a good lap. And they would do impeding penalties. PKS and WK, which is a more defunct style organization for the races they used to host, was like, well, if we just limit them to 2 laps, then the risk you take of setting your one good lap being to try and set a tow is not worth the squeeze in a way. Like you might set yourself up, but if that guy you gambled on to run good and tow off of screws you over, you only get one shot at it. So I think the England thing is a really smart way to do it. And then if you're doing a 6-7 minute session, there's enough room on the racetrack. You could combine those groups back up and do 30-40 cart grids on track and just do the 3-lap average. And like you said, it's not as spectacular.
There's tons of ways to do it, isn't there? Like, there's always going to be pros and cons. Like I've always been a fan of, like, they used to do it back in the day. I think like 20 years ago, 15 years ago in the FIA thing, they did like a super pole. So it was like, okay, so your top 10 then go out all separate. Like they're not allowed to go near each other on track. They all get given another set of new tire, and it's like who can do the pole. And I feel like that's a good way of doing it as well, because you don't have any slipstream involved. It's who can do that one perfect lap. They're the pole. And then they did like I think it was like super pole then was like £1,000 prize money if you did the super pole. So I don't know. I just feel like there's so many different ways of things that you can try to do. That obviously takes time over a week. And like if every class did a super pole, it would take ages. So it can't happen. But I don't know, maybe at Vegas, they could do it just once in the year or whatever.
Yeah, like the Rotax guys in the last couple of years, they did Super Bowl 2 for the top 6, and it was every class. So they had to do it on the Friday, and the Friday would run long. And Supernats has tried some stuff like that. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, but they did probably too big. They did 20, and it was just a second session with a hot pit. But as you know, and you can attest to the promoters, a hot pit's kind of a moot point if you don't have another set of tires to put on. Because all that happened in that 20-minute session was everybody waited till the last 5 minutes or last 3. Like one guy went out and ran the whole session or ran like 10 laps. He went out early. Everybody else waited.
He's still going.
Yeah, he's still going. They go out as he's peaked and just run one lap in it. So the hot pit stuff, like us over here, because we don't normally have the hot grid like all the European FIA races do. The only series that does is Challenge of the Americas. They do it for a final practice session. They do it for their happy hour, which I think is kind of cool because it's a single go-kart, single engine. So you actually do those like changes on the fly on used rubber. But we're like obsessed with it. I feel like every time we talk about quali formats, that comes up. Let's do a hot grid. And it's like, no one's going to do anything. Like you go out, you run your 3 laps on the new rubber, and that's it. Like there's no improvement.
You're not going to stop and go faster.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the guy, either that or then, like you say, everyone just waits. Like that guy who went out first, he's first for 17 minutes. Like he's got a screenshot of pole. He's put that on Instagram, and then everyone's gone out, and now he's like P30. But I mean, a quali sessions now, they used to be 5-6 years ago. They used to be 10 minutes. Everyone would just wait. Now they're like 6 because people have actually realized, okay, everyone just waits. We'll just make them 6 minutes. USPKS, I think it was 5 laps, and you came out the pits in Texas and your lap started straight away, and that was like your first lap. But then that's a good thing because then everyone just goes.
And you yourself too, speaking on qualifying, I noticed this with you even in some of the practice sessions, you'd go new rubber. you do almost, I feel like, 2 warm-up laps, whereas most of the guys over here, if they do any kind of warm-up lap, it's maybe just 1. You almost do like 1 to 2, then do a push lap, and then like do a cool-down lap. We've seen that with some of our shifter guys a little bit, but you do it more, I feel like, than almost any other X30 guy. Did you learn that running the MGs over in Europe? Is that something you've kind of always done? Like, I feel like you take more time to warm up the tires, and then as soon as you do 1 good lap, you cool them down and set up for like almost another run.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting old. Like, I can't just go out the blocks like the kids do and just go flat out. But no, like, I don't know. The MG, I feel it's a weird tire. Like, you don't want to be too nice to it. You don't want to be too hard on it, because then it just gets too hot, or like, and then you never get it back. Like the MG, I know you had Ryan on talking about it as well, about like how it is now compared to a few years ago, what they're doing in the future. But that tire is just kind of weird. Yeah, I don't know. I try to take care of it if I can, especially when it's new, because if you destroy it when it's new, then it's tough to get it back.
Yeah, that's actually one of the comment questions here I just got from Aaron. That was one of the guys asking, like, how do you get the cart to be really quick, fire off well? It's from Racing Junkie. So this kind of goes on with what we were saying. He says the 1 lap thing, how do you get the cart to be the fastest on the first lap? Obviously high pressures. I don't know how to make the first lap the fastest for sure. In your case, it's never that. You don't do that
No.
normally. You're normally
No.
you're normally late,
I mean,
probably one of the latest in the session.
yeah, I guess so. Like, I mean, the way we set up is to be a bit better later on, but then I think me as well, I never go out the gate really hard and try and go fast straight away. Like, I think as well, sort of like when you pump up as well, when you just put more air in the tire, it doesn't actually help that much at the start anyway. Okay, if you're too low, then for sure you're not going to go on the first few laps. But if you're in the right window, then putting 2 psi more in, it's not actually going to help you really at the start. I don't think. You just skate around loads.
This was actually I'm gonna steal one of our questions. We have one Q&A after when we let you go, but I know you're already up late enough. So what's another 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'd like this question a lot, and I think you'll be able to equally answer it with the pedigree you've got right now. So, this is from a father of a kid who's running, just get into micro, just get out of kid carts. I think, if I'm right, might be looking at a mini. And so it is a young driver's time and money better spent on running bigger competition races, like let's say, in the U.S. national level, traveling a good bit. They won't win, but maybe they drop in the mid-pack, or better doing more one-on-one days and doing more club stuff. From your perspective, what do you think?
Golf. There's more money in it. You can get yourself a nice set of clubs. You earn tons of money. You play in the sunshine every week. Play golf.
Fair.
So what is it? Young drivers' time, money, national races.
He's saying if you stay off the national scene.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, the thing is, if you stay off the national scene, you stay somewhere where you can win every time. You could have the best coach with you. You're not going to learn that much, because I've always sort of believed it's better to be in at the deep end. Like, as soon as you've become good at, say, now you're winning in mini, go up to juniors. Now you're starting to win in juniors, go up to seniors. And although, yeah, it's nice to win, if you want to get as best as you can by the time you're, say, 15, then just try and just keep moving up and challenging yourself. And do a mix, do a bit of national, do a bit of like sort of private races or whatever it is, regional races, and bring a coach along. I mean, do your regional races just you and your son or whatever in your team, and then when you go to your national races, bring a coach along.
I like that answer. As we kind of wrap up here with your time a little bit and let you go, before we do, the last thing I wanted to ask you personally on is, you've been over here a handful of times. I don't know how many guys really knew you well coming into the year. I think a handful did. I feel like a lot more due now with how good you've done both here and overseas. Do you feel like you're starting to develop a bit of a following and fan base here? Do you have guys kind of come up to you in the paddock that ask for pictures and kids, or people come and chat with you that you're like, I feel like almost guilty. I don't know this guy's name because he's talking to me like he knows me, but I don't know him yet.
I mean, a bit, but it's cool. And there's been kids from the start as well. I know Peyton in KA Senior was popping off a bit in the kart chaser comment at the start of the year. So he's been there since day one. But no, it's cool. There's a lot of drivers who are interested over in the US, but as well when I come back here, a lot of the drivers who I've been racing with years here, they ask what's it like racing over there, and they're sort of interested in coming over. So I think even Utah, we're going to try and bring a driver over, and definitely at Supernats we're going to bring a couple of drivers who just fancy running and they want to see what it's all about and try and run at Supernats. So I think we should have a couple come over for that.
So we got your schedule somewhat, I feel like, aligned then. We know you'll be here for Utah. Obviously, Supernats, that's the big one. I've actually got some insider info a little bit. I think the announcement of when that's going to be, where it's going to be, comes out here within about a week or so.
Right.
Officially announced that Utah, which would be cool. But from your end, obviously they got your Instagram down below. What's the next month and a half look like for Joe Turney Racing?
So I'm week off this week. I've got European Championship next week in Czech Republic. Then I'll be home a bit, like half a week. I've got a test because we're going for the next European Championship in June in a track we've never been before in Denmark. So we've got a test there and then a race and then the European. But in between all that, somewhere there's Utah. And then after that, there's maybe uspks in Newcastle, which is a possibility. But I'm not sure if I'm going to run both Utah or Newcastle or one or the other. At the moment, it's sort of up in the air. I'm just waiting for it to land. So we'll see.
Well, we're excited to have you either way, buddy. Thanks for the time tonight. I appreciate it. And we'll let you get some sleep. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be nice. Starting to nod off.
We'll let you get to it here, Joe. Thank you, buddy.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys. That does it with Joe Turney, one of the best in the world. Super cool to have him here, and a big kudos to him. It's about 1 a.m. where he's at right now, so he made time for us, and a huge thank you if you haven't followed him already in his racing. That dude is a beast, and we're lucky to have him racing here stateside the rest of the year. Got a lot more viewer questions that you guys have submitted in. I haven't really touched much about the racing last week, this week, coming up. All that right after this break. Ready to go racing along the Gulf Coast? Karting the Coast is a family-oriented regional series that covers Mississippi and Louisiana. Its 2023 schedule consists of 10 races spread amongst Finish Line Performance Karting in Biloxi, Mississippi, and NOLA Motorsports Park in New Orleans. To find out more, visit coastalkarting.com. From 4-stroke to 100cc to 125cc and beyond, Technokart USA has a winning option for you. Based out of Des Plaines, Illinois, Technokart USA offers both chassis designed to win in all divisions of North American karting and a top-level race support program at the U.S. Pro Kart Series, Route 66 Sprint Series, select Cup Karts North America races, and both the Rock Vegas and SCUSA Super Nationals. Podiums, wins, and championships are waiting for you whenever you're ready to get on a Technokart. For more information, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/TechnokartUSA. All right. Welcome back to KC Happy Hour. We have our typical Ask Xander Q&A segment. We'll bring in my good buddy Taylor to hit me up with the rest of the questions that we got here for tonight. So, Taylor, what do we got, man?
Well, first and foremost, Xander, this was a little bit discussing about some of the amazing content that was released during the Stars Championship weekend. And this is about thoughts on using onboard on cameras on multiple drivers.
Yeah, so we gave that exclusive last week that we were going to be debuting our onboard camera at the Stars Series last weekend. We tested it at USPKS Houston, ran it at Stars. Right now we just have one of them. Test went pretty good. we actually learned a little bit. And the second go-kart, we put it on with Brooke Knoxman. We mentioned a little over the stream. We had one wire come a little loose. Got to resolder that up. So we'll probably go back to the drawing board on the design of the carts a little, or the onboard camera a little bit. I've actually got some meetings over the next 2 weeks. Our goal is to do one of two things, and that's to get a fleet of a handful of cameras that we could put on, and then on a secondary level, maybe even have someone that's able to mount and dismount them from the scale line over to the pre-grid area back and forth, and we can run them in almost every class. Or if we just are restricted to putting them on one guy all day, in which case, obviously, for the headline classes, we would do exclusively in, let's say, KZ or Pro Shifter X30, maybe do one in KA Senior. So that the onboard stuff, it's a moving target right now. It was super cool that it worked. The tech we have works, the software works, but there is a little more R&D that we need to do to it. And hopefully, now that we have the demo, the big job for me right now is to try and go around and see if we can get us some sponsorship for it, because it is a lot more expensive than a GoPro to do that. There's the capability with the GoPro to live stream from a GoPro camera, but you typically have to delay it about 5 to 10 seconds. So if you want to do that, which also requires a lot more networking still at the track and investment anyway. But we're, as most people know, I don't like harping on this too much. I don't want to sound like a broken record that we are lean, but our broadcast deals aren't built in to factor that cost in. Thankfully, the subscription stuff does help us give a little wiggle room for testing. But it'll be a little bit series to series. If series want to jump on, there'll be a much cheaper option to just have those cameras put on one guy for the whole day. They'll be a little more expensive if we need to bring in an entirely separate person to manage a fleet of cameras, and there'll still be a little bit of management with it as a whole. But as of right now, yes, it's the start of doing it. We're early in the process. We do need to tinker with it a little. You won't see it at TSRS Denton. In theory, we'll have it fixed up and hopefully able to be run with at least one person for some more trials at SCUSA Utah and Stars Newcastle in June. But right now we got to fix it first, because the wire needs to get resoldered, and I need to do a lot of shopping around. I'd love to say we could find an onboard camera sponsor that could help us afford a little more of a bigger fleet, and maybe even if that sponsor could even afford to help bring that person to the track, and then I don't have to go and ask the series to say, hey, this is something really cool we can bring to the broadcast. We'd like to add it on. And it's not going to be any cost or minimal cost to them, because as cool as it is, I think it's a huge value add. I think everybody loves it. I think the racers love it. It's got to make sense for everybody to do it. We're all in it as a business, and we can't lose too much money. So, but yes, more to come.
I will say, being a part of that production for that broadcast where we use the onboard camera, watching everyone who was around our broadcast booth, we had almost close to 20, 30 people just looking at our screens to be able to see what that onboard camera liked. And I think at the end of that event, everyone was just high-fiving, giving big handshakes and congratulatories on the success of at least of the first attempt using that onboard camera. And like you said, can't wait to use it for future events in 2023. But we'll move on. Speaking a little bit of onboard camera stills, this is more so for driver help. How viable is a live helmet feed?
There is the tech for that. We've touched on in the show in the past that unfortunately, our sport is in a little bit of a hot water situation with insurance, losing one of the major providers coming into 2023. Talking with Joe Janowski from the NK, there's down to only two insurance providers in the entire country that will insure go-kart racing. So as many of you guys know, technically those cam box cameras that run on the inside visor of the helmet that are a Velcro strip that mount to the top of the padding, those are outlawed at every major race. It obviously all goes back to the Michael Schumacher incident when he had his really, really terrible skiing and snowboarding incident, and he had a GoPro on his helmet, and the GoPro went into the helmet, and so all the helmet manufacturers said anything that's our helmet wasn't built to have a sticky mount camera on the top of it. It was meant for impact beyond that, as all the lawsuits went around and everything. That all trickles down. So anything inside the helmet is a very touchy subject. I even was texting Mark Coates a little bit about it with the uspks that, hey, I have a guy. I met with him earlier this year. He's got the tech. It's very similar technology. It's almost the same thing as what we did for the onboard camera. But it would require putting a camera inside the helmet and an antenna that would stick on the side of the helmet, since you can't mount it inside the car. So since our drivers in karting are meant to eject, it's all got to be on the driver versus bolted on the go-kart if it's going to be a helmet cam. And that, to me, I just don't see it being a realistic possibility right now with the landscape of American insurance when it comes to kart racing. As cool as that aspect would be, the tech is there. The potential for liability is too high. So that's where we stand with the live helmet feeds.
Yeah, we currently see that type of tech when it comes to Formula E, Formula One, and then now currently also the NASCAR series. So hopefully we'll be able to have some things handled in the future to be able to utilize this brand new technology. A couple of other opportunities possibly with some content with Kart Chaser. Will there be a Kart Chaser at Cup Kart North America again?
We've talked about it a little bit on some of the other shows. We have been in contact with Greg and the guys at CKNA. Would love to get there. I wish I could say that we had a big sponsor or that our sport was big enough that we could rely just off our subscription. So it'll be a matter of if that event, if it makes sense to help bring us and if we can also bring some sponsor money with it. It's very similar to how pro racing works with seats, that a lot of times drivers need to bring some ad revenue. The further out that we get an agreement together of whatever that budget is, the further out that we can start shopping around to advertisers and seeing if we can bring some revenue to those races to offset the cost to the promoter and make it sustainable. They know where we're at. We know where we are at as of right now. The answer is no, but it's not 100% no. They haven't told me no. We just don't have a definite yes. I'd love to go. But I don't have plans as of this second to be there. So the big ways to get us there, obviously, if there's any companies anyone's associated with that would like to be involved with karting, specifically with Kart Chaser at CKNA, if you send those guys our way, we can make the deal happen. If you guys reach out to your CKNA representatives, whether it's Greg, the series owner, or anyone at your local events, if you go around and say, hey, we'd love to have Kart Chaser there, then they can see that there's the value. Because the toughest thing for us, and I spoke about it a little bit for those of you guys that watched the Ohio Sprint Series on camera, off camera podcast on Monday, is, we do rely on the series promoters to be able to bring us in. And so since we got in with every single major national championship in 2022, there was no case study that could be done of saying, hey, Kart Chaser brings this many more entries or this many more people to the racetrack. In fact, sometimes you can look at it and think that we are a detriment and think that, well, now Kart Chaser's here, we're going to sell less pit passes because people don't need to come to the race to watch the race. So the only way to combat that as racers, if you want us to be there, I would love to be there. I love the atmosphere. I grew up racing Clone Junior right before 206. I've raced 206 races. We're going to do some vlogs with some stuff later this year, racing 206 and 100cc stuff. I love that aspect of the sport. I love how laid back it is. I love how less political I feel like it is. It doesn't, it's just it's a more grassroots. I feel like it's almost like a buzzword we use a little too much now in our industry. But I really enjoy the atmosphere. I think those guys have built an amazing product, an amazing series. But by doing that, their entry fees are half of that of every national race. So their budget to operate, to put any kind of marketing dollars up, extra race officials, whatever, is much smaller. That means that we're a much bigger dent in their budget if they bring us. And again, they're a business too. They got to make money to stick around. It's not a volunteer sport to do what they do for the hours that goes in. So all in all, I know it's a long-winded answer, but in the short answer, if you would like us there, the best thing you can do is reach out to CKNA and say that you'd like us to be there. I can tell you from our end, we'll go if we can make it happen, but we don't have the angel dollars to go there on our own dime. So that's what it kind of comes down to.
We'll have to wait and see in the future. Now, this one's a little bit of an interesting one. Xander, me and you, of course, living here in Texas, seeing multiple different regional series, as well as across the country. There's so many regional series in particular states. So this is a two-parter. Are there too many regional series across the U.S.?
So yeah, are there too many regional series, and do they water down the competition when they're booked on the same weekend? They do water down the competition, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think a lot of people sometimes when I talk about wanting to boot guys out of KA, boot top guys out of KA or 206, look at that as, oh, it's like a snooty looking down on, and that's not at all the case. You heard it from Joe a little bit and Chris that, the manufacturers there's high pressure at these high levels. And we do have that to a degree, a lesser degree, granted, at the U.S. Nationals with the X30 and the shifter and the OKN guys that they need to perform for the teams and the manufacturers that support them. And I was talking to a parent actually about the Trackhouse Motorplex Club Series that, the Club Series in Mooresville has been averaging over 200 drivers every single event. It felt like they did in 2022. And this year, a couple of events have been down around the 160, 170 mark. I don't think that's bad. The reason for that is the oversaturation of touring series, of national or kind of super regional series on the cusp of national, like Stars. We're calling them national this year. Obviously, they don't have all the big guys, all the big teams there, but it's a big event. And I think when you start watering down the competition a little bit, it opens the door for more new drivers to get better results and keeps them motivated. So this is a holistic view on the sport that, again, the competitive side and everybody, you want to be the best. You want to feel like you're the best. You want to feel like you can beat the best, and you want to actually beat the best. Not everybody likes to hear, but it's the same reason why we have masters classes. Like, why do we have a 30 and over class if the 15 and over is an adult class? It's because the guys in the 30 and over class don't want to race against kids that are able to race weekend to weekend to weekend. They want to work their 9 to 5, take 5 weekends worth of vacation time and drive their go-kart 5 times a year against guys that are doing the same thing. And so when you talk about the number of regionals or the number of nationals starting to water down the club competition, it opens the door to have, those club guys that have a smaller budget, that don't put on new tires every race, to still be competitive and win. And you pull those bigger budget or more sponsored or more funded guys out of that region. I mean, in the same way, the KA class this weekend, 20 guys went home in KA senior. That should have been racing probably that main event, because the top 10 guys, the top 15 guys were racing KA that are at a level they should be in a pro class off experience or budget behind them. We've kind of given a pass a little bit to guys like Max Taylor that are rookies to double dip, but even then, Max was a top X30 junior guy. He should be disbarred from KA. Not a knock on him. It should be a compliment. He's too good. He's got too much experience. He's going to dominate. He should get booted out. Aiden Levy won this weekend. Now, I don't want to say that on Aiden. Aiden didn't have a national win till this year, but that's because the class was so competitive last year with guys like Jeremy Fletcher. The whole top 10, if you move those guys on, then there's room. And yes, there's less entries in KA, but all those guys get to race the main event. One of the comments on the Stars series was asking if they could have a second B final for the guys that missed the main off the pre-final to get one more session in because they paid the same entry. And I get the argument. I don't think it's the right decision for the Stars guys if they're trying to be a bigger touring series, but I don't think it's a bad thing. Totally. I think that with the club series and the regionals even overlapping each other, but the clubs themselves having so much touring series racing action, so much regional action that it pulls your top guys away from your club. The club goes down a little bit. but it should open the door of opportunity for more guys to continue to race the club and go up. And you get back to where you were about 20 years ago when none of the guys at the different levels were consistently pitted against each other. Joe Turney, thankfully, doesn't come and race club races. Ryan Norberg doesn't race club races. Marian Kremers did one in KZ last year. I love Marian, and I'm glad that he was able to make money and get hired to go and run that club event. And it was a good spotlight once a year for only one national guy to go run it. But even him, like he shouldn't have to be there to run that stuff because it's not fair. So the real issue, I don't think so much is it's pulling drivers away a little bit. I'd say the real issue is kind of two parts. Number one, the license system that's coming with NAKL and some of the other series should kind of start turning some guys away. And maybe that's the right instance for those 20 guys that didn't make the main at Stars that should go back home and run some more club and smaller race series stuff and get better and then go back to Stars. If they're not able to make the top 40, maybe they should go back down. There's no rule that says they can't keep showing up and trying. And then on the flip side, at the club stuff, we need those guys away. But more importantly, the business model of our sport, there's only a handful of shops that I know off one hand that are able to make a sustainable living staying local. And that's the bigger issue that as an industry, I don't have the full answer for. But that's what will keep those clubs alive. I don't think it's as much of an issue that the drivers leave. The bigger issue is that the teams that are rooted in those home tracks have to leave too much. And if there was some way that they could have a satellite team stay home and still be a salesperson for that club to bring drivers in, then we wouldn't have the issue and it would fill back up instantly. But that's the bigger end of the problem is we don't have a good enough local model for these shops to be able to stay local and support customers at the bottom level while still having a team at the top and fill that up. But I think it is a good thing that you're watering down the competition just a touch by bringing the guys that do chase the national series away from their clubs and making room for newer entry-level drivers to finish on the podium. Because if you go to those Trackhouse Motorplex club races, if you go to even, Cal Speed, formerly Cal Speed, probably soon to be K1, when their club does get going and there's guys there that are national level guys racing KA because it's the biggest class of the club, what do you tell a new guy? I mean, a new guy could buy a go-kart today, and I guarantee you he could drive 200 test days and all the club events, and he may still not crack the top 5 or even the top 10 in KA at a Trackhouse Motorplex club race. So what do? That guy's going to give up and quit. You need to boot the Dalton Hayneses out. You need to boot the other guys out. And if you're going to boot them out, there's got to be a reason, and a way for them to stay above that club level. So there's a couple things with it, but I think we're at a pendulum or an opportunity point for our sport to have different tiers and guys not running all three.
It's a really interesting opportunity. We'll see how it plays out as we progress. But moving on with the next question, this is a little bit about the OKNs that we were just discussing about. With OKN being brought in and splitting up major single-speed classes, will it be easier to police the driving?
Yeah, no. I mean, you won't ever see an OKN race at a race there's an X30 race at. And obviously, as we saw, the KA field was still sold out with 17 OKNs. I don't think they probably missed any penalty call in that OKN race at 17. So, yes, to a degree. We've heard guys on the show, race directors, series promoters come and say, hey, from 25th, 30th on back, they're not going to catch it. It's just the nature of the beast. It's a lucky star if they are able to catch an incident that far back because they're not looking that far back. So it kind of can if it does pull guys out and it splits the fields a little bit. The same thing even at the club races. If a club races 40 go-karts consistently, set up a non-points novice class that as soon as you finish in the top 3, you can't run it again. And run club races of 25 or less, So not necessarily with the OKN is the answer to that, but it's on the right track that we run races with too many go-karts on the racetrack to catch everything, even with the full video system and as many marshals as you want, because everyone's going to focus on the leading half of the field for incidents outside of when something is major and catches their eye. So the OKN won't necessarily fix the driving a little bit by pulling drivers out because you won't see it at an X30 event and the other races are a little too big. But if people would be okay, pun intended, pun and not intended, if people would be satisfactory with a 30 cart main event at a national and knowing that you might be a good guy, 25th level speed, 20th level speed, 15th level speed, and you miss the main, then that'll get cleaned up. But the real answer is the grid's got to get smaller, and it doesn't mean the entry list has to get smaller. It means we as Americans and as parents need to get okay and become, compliant and complicit with we might not make every single main event, and we might not be good enough on one weekend or have a bad weekend and miss it. And we can't go and moan and complain to the race director to open the race up to 40. I have to give a huge kudos to Stars and KA Junior. They could have run 42. They stuck to their guns and ran 40 and still sent guys home. And it meant there was only a 12 driver KA pre-final B. Every penalty got caught, and they ran 40 in the main event. That's what we got to do. You got to put your foot down. You got to draw the line somewhere. We can't just let everyone into the party, because at some point the party is no longer a party and it's an all-out street fight, and that's not fair or safe for anybody.
No, it's certainly not. You kind of think about it in the dirt racing world where, you have a set limit of number of drivers who race week in and week out, and some guys will go home one week and be able to race into the main event the next week. So it's just a matter of how the series work together to build up that consistency week after week. Continuing with our OKN's questions and topic, will OKN overtake X30?
Yeah, we get this a lot, right? I think we talked about it a little bit last week. OKN is more expensive up front. We're hearing retail prices around $5,500. Built out motor. The motor retails in the U.S. box stock around $4K, but it won't be competitive because you can build it more. Longevity, it is supposed to go a little longer, but at the end of the day, where the OKN is going to lie in our market is only at the national championships. And at every national championship race, you're going to rebuild that thing right before the weekend, and you're going to run it for 4 hours. So you're going to only put 4 or 5 hours on a piston, and you're going to do a full top end and maybe a full bottom end. So expense-wise, it's going to be more. The only opportunity is a dream that we've talked about, that maybe by having multiple engine manufacturers, you will get free opportunities for drivers that don't get them in the spec classes to run an engine. Wes Duchak, for example, is an X30 guy that's run with RPG, has run with PK. I love Wes. I don't want to talk down on him, but he's not put up top 10 results consistently. He's gotten there every once in a while, but he's a top 20 kind of guy. This weekend, he got an opportunity with Modena-backed DR to go race at Stars that he wouldn't have shown up otherwise. That's cool. That's the opportunity OKN really has in my eyes. If the manufacturers get behind it and look at it as a branding opportunity where they can, flex their muscle as an engine brand of what they're able to put out, and you've got 5 to 6 new sponsorship avenues to discount the total cost that a driver spends on a weekend. That's the only competitive advantage it has. The other advantage it has is that people believe that the X30 class was dying because the parity was going out the window in 2022. The parity has come back in 2023. Granted, we brought more drivers of Ryan Norberg level into the field. Last year, it was Ryan Norberg, Austin Garrison, and for the most part, 15-year-olds, rookies. They're not going to be at the level those guys are. They might be able to hit the same fast lap. They might have 1 or 2 good weekends, but week in, week out, they won't be at the level of Austin Garrison and Ryan Norberg. So you needed more guys. Well, now we have Joe Turney. Now we have Harley Keeble. Now we have Brandon Carr, who's a rookie, but he's a really damn good rookie. Louis Westover's come over. Ellie Goldstein's come over. You got more guys, and they've tightened up, obviously, the pipe policy. That's cleaned that up. I don't think that was the reason why RPG won last year. I've said that on here before. But if OKN was going to take over, if any engine takes over and becomes the dominant engine over the X30, the only way that happens is if the X30 falls or is there's a major price difference. We know now with OKN, and we knew going in, the pricing was not going to be more competitive. The only way it beats it is if X30 really dies with bad parity and high expense. And neither of those things are happening. So the only other way that OKN gets even to the level that the X30 stuff gets to is if, for whatever reason, guys really want to run it, or if those manufacturers start making it where it's easier to be able to run cost-wise because the manufacturers sponsor the engine package. Who knows? But that's the only ways I see it happening. X30 I don't see like dying off because I think this year is one of the best years we've seen in a couple of years with it.
Have to agree with you on that, Xander. Final question that we have. This is from our live audience from Howie. It's talking about the karting scene in Southern California. It's took a little bit of a massive hit since the loss of Cal Speed. Have you or has anyone, one person, of course, have any updates regarding the K1 circuit? And just not long ago, we were talking to one of the managers over at K1, Mike Smith.
Yeah, Mike obviously came over and announced with us USPKS Houston. He's over there full time, took time off his job to come over and announce with us. I think with Mike, talking with him, California, we heard it from Mike, heard it from Billy Musgrave. That state has been hit with more rain than, it's been a rainy winter and a rainy spring. That's hurt every track's development. The lock up in Lorain, Ohio has been delayed. K1's been delayed. K1, obviously, they got the paving down, but they don't have any facilities in yet. There's permits or stuff to go through. The latest I've heard, Howie, is, early summer. Not much different than you. Things are moving. Nothing's stopped. But in terms of where it lies, I don't know. I haven't heard of an official announced date. I'm sure they'll tell us as soon as they get it. I know they're working hard to get there, but nothing yet. But it sounds like now as we get out of the rainy spring and winter that things will move a lot faster into the summer. And hopefully, June, July, it's going to be open for testing.
Well, we hope we're going to look forward to that with anticipations. We have another one that just came in from Duel in the Desert Kart Racing. What's your wildest idea to shake up the sport and bring in more spectators?
It's a long answer. I won't have enough time on this happy hour to lay it out. I'll lay it out in a better video when we get more time. But a couple things. First, like Joe said, F1's marketing is the best. F1's product's not the best. Their marketing is the best. The marketing comes down to building up drivers to root for or root against. We all know as karters that we think we've got some of the best, if not the best, racing out there. Product-wise, we're amazing. Short races for the younger generation, a pretty level playing field in most classes. Driver talent really gets there. The barrier to entry in terms of other professional motorsport is astronomically lower for if a team or manufacturer wanted to buy in and run a pro guy for a weekend. How do you get those spectators there? Well, you look at what every other professional motorsport and whatever professional sport has done, and that is they've made their sport a somewhat of a sideshow. A lot of guys were kind of critiquing the drivers and the fans on the F1 driver intros. I get it, but at the end of the day, racing is a spectacle. How it's consumed is different. Every sport is drastically changing. Baseball's put in time clocks on pitching. Football, they're constantly changing the overtime rules. The NBA, all of these guys are looking at different ways to bring spectators in. At the end of the day, the product is somewhat irrelevant. I think we've got an amazing product. Our tracks aren't really built for spectators. You can't really lay out most of our tracks to have a paddock split away and a main grandstand and generic viewing area. The events aren't set for it. We're there for the whole day, and classes have 4 to 5 hour breaks. I think that the actual raw product of what go-karting is could absolutely work for a spectator event. But it would not look anything like any of the racing we've ever done before. We would have to have 2 classes, probably maximum, in a 3-hour time window. And you would have to have it where, again, the rate, it's like you're going to a festival or you're going to a carnival and a race breaks out. Then whatever that race is, it doesn't really matter. I mean, look at the guys that go to Formula One races. Look at some of the guys that are at some of the big IndyCar street races, or even at the Daytona 500. Any NASCAR race, you talk to the guys that camp out at the NASCAR races. They might be a fan of a driver, but they're there to party and have a good time in the infield, and cars go around. The same with the endurance races. So in the modern world, that's what sells tickets. It's not the spectacle of how fast we go. It's not how good of a race we put on. How good of a race we put on is a small factor. I don't want to say it's zero, but I think what we're seeing in professional sports nowadays and professional racing especially, it's not a miracle like a rocket launch to watch a car go 200 miles an hour and last for 4 hours. And that's why NASCAR brought the segments in. And I think that opens the window of opportunity for us. If the spectacle of the product, of how fast we go or how long the engines last, isn't as important, and it's more about the storylines, the drama, the battle, and more importantly than anything, the actual fan experience. If you ask yourself, when was the last basketball, football game, college football game, whatever you went to, you might remember which team won, but you probably cannot remember what the score was. What were your core memories from that event? Your core memories were you chugging a beer in the parking lot, or you having good food, or you having a good time, or taking a picture with your friends and family. And so if you're going to have a spectator event, it can't look anything like how our events are now. And that's a big risk and a big jump of the shark, because that means if we're going to do something totally different and we're going to neglect 70% of our entry fee and pit pass revenue from the other classes by cutting them off the card to make room for a good pro show for 2 to 3 hours at the end of the night, you've got to supplement that revenue with a completely other way of doing it. Now, I think the one advantage that we have with our sport is that we can bring rental carts out to our track and we could put them on the racetrack in VIP races. And that's been done before. It's done at the Elkhart Grand Prix on the street race. It used to be done at the Lancaster Grand Prix. Granted, those are free to attend events, but there's a lot of creative ideas to bring people to the event and then to kind of almost stumble upon a race on the side. And that's the mentality that would have to be taken for spectator racing. I even have this discussion a lot with our people that watch the live streams as we wrap this up, that, we've got carters, club carters, which is the next ring. Like initially with our live streams, friends and family. Sure, friends and family of each raiser in each class tunes in and watches their class. Maybe they watch another class. They don't really care. They just care about their guy. All right, next step. Now we need to find people that already race go-karts, that already like to watch go-karting, like to race go-karting. We need to make it enjoyable for them to watch. I think we've accomplished that. I think most people in karting know about us and starting to pay attention to national races more than they were before. The step after that is the hardcore racing fan that subscribed to Flow Racing, subscribed to Dirt Vision, goes to the local short tracks and watches all that racing. How do we get them to watch what we do? I think we've got a great racing product, just like those guys do, and that's what that's all about. Well, those guys are able to watch those headline classes in a short 2 to 3 hour format. We're not like that now. Luckily, we've got the viewership data. There's a 20% uptick whenever X30 or Pro Shifter go on the racetrack, or in this case, OKN. And chicken or the egg, you could say maybe it's because we push those drivers more, but I think that a lot of that was already beforehand. Now we've got that viewership data, so we can talk to these series about doing a little bit of extra things to try and make those guys in a better time slot. You guys will notice we put out daily tune-in alerts for those specific classes at those specific times, and that's helped boost that kind of ratings. The online viewership comes first, the in-person viewership comes second, the TV viewership comes third. But realistically, if you want spectators to be there, we've got to be almost kind of an add-on. Your ticket price needs to account for inflatables and bounce houses and interactive food trucks and other kinds of exhibits. And then, just by happenstance, at 6 o'clock, the pro guys went on the racetrack and you go watch them. But it would take a complete shift of where we're at. And I think we can get there with the right people. And I think we're making the right strides for it against what people think. And it could be a very Chili Bowl, Nationals, Snowball Derby-esque event. No one's willing to try that right now. We're years away from it, but it could be.
All we have to say is we look ahead to the future. But with that will conclude our Q&A presented by Mega Power Engines. Xander, and as we look ahead for what's to come, as well as some of the exciting things that we'll have here, our next race for Kart Chase will be TSRS up in Denton.
Yep, we'll be there here at the end of the month. There's some regional racing. Obviously, the Rotax Trophy West is going on this weekend. Route 66 Sprint Series gets underway, I believe, either this week or next week over at Newcastle Motorsports Park. Lots of regional racing. Support your club. Support your regional series if you can. We'll be back live here in a few weeks. We'll be back live on Kart Chaser here with Happy Hour. Next Wednesday, Stars Championship Series official liaison and one of the higher-ups at the series, Christian Marshall, was with us a couple weeks ago. He'll be back with us, and, of course, everybody else. So, as always, guys, thanks for tuning in. We will see everybody next week for episode number 87.